Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another Wizard101 video. I'm your host of Friends Gamer, and today I want to discuss a new topic for the Wizard101 Rant series. But before I get to that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who supported the series. I know that I wasn't necessarily going to do that well, and it didn't, but at the same time, I did see that there was quite a bit of potential for this series for sure. And I definitely want to keep going for sure in future videos and talk about various interesting topics that you generally won't see from me in terms of like a complete analysis, just because of the fact that either it was kind of already talked about, either it's a really old subject, or it's just something to where I can't necessarily just make a full-on analysis on in the first place. So definitely, if you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. And also shouts out to Blake for checking out the recent video, or at least the first video of the series. So again, really appreciate the kind words, really appreciate the support, and again, I'm just blessed, y'all. I'm blessed at the end of the day. But essentially, do expect 2 videos of this coming out this week, because I don't necessarily have much that I can make in terms of videos. I'm really busy with school and work, and I have an exam coming up next week, so obviously not much time in terms of just making, you know, very specific Wizard101 videos. And I hope that you guys can understand, and at the end of the day, definitely do expect a little bit better content coming out next week. But without further ado, let's get started with today's video. So for today's topic, I wanted to talk about overtimes and as to what exactly can be done with them as of right now. Now, I'm not talking about the cheap overtimes. I'm not talking about poison, fire elf, or frostbite, because those are fine. They're obviously used for momentum purposes and shield breaking purposes, which is the same thing as momentum at the end of the day, but it's obvious what they're used for. The problem that I'm talking about as of today is big pip overtime. So we're talking about spells like, you know, Myth King Artorias. You know, we're talking about Basilisk. We're talking about spells like Skeletal Dragon. Those are the spells that are pretty much extinct as of right now in terms of PvP. And there's some reasons why. The reason why is because of how the turn-based system is as of today. Before then, you had 2 people, you know, just doing 1 round of first and second. So like there's an opponent who goes first and there's the other person who goes second. And the thing about how overtimes work there is obviously they were both used for offensive purposes most of the time, but generally using overtimes when you're first is way better than using overtimes when you're second. But you can still technically use them when you're second, just because of the fact that it will probably give you a little bit more time in order to set up for a hit, or maybe play a little bit more defensive, just because of the fact that either way, either or person is going to try to counter the overtime at the end of the day. Now, in some cases, there are some cases to where you don't necessarily want to counter the overtime and instead want to play a little bit more offensively. And again, at the end of the day, it's all situational, but generally trying to counteract the overtime is universally the best move in PvP. But there are some cases to where it's not. However, in the new turn-based system, everyone carries triage, everyone carries shift. It's a lot easier to counter them, because the way the new turn-based system works is that there's a round where you go first and a round where the opponent goes first right then and there. Basically, they both take turns every round. And the thing with this is that it gives more time to counteract the other person's move, thus making overtimes probably the most counterable and likely the most pip wasting if it is already countered. So the reason why not many people tend to even use overtimes nowadays in terms of big hit overtimes is generally just because of the fact of how the new turn-based system works. You're not going to be seeing a nice wizard just go for a random snow angel, even though it does slightly more damage, and it's also an AoE, which is awesome. But you're also not going to be seeing many death wizards just go for a straight up skeletal dragon to a combo hit that's a single target, just because of the fact of how the new turn-based system works. And you might see it in some cases, but most of the time as of now, you generally won't see it, just because of the fact that you already expect the opponent to have a triage or shift on hand, or at least be able to find them fairly quickly, and thus basically wasting your pips. So what exactly can be done about fixing this issue with big hit overtimes? Personally, it's an idea that has been around for quite some time, And it's an idea that's been around within the Wizard101 community. It's been an idea that's been around with, you know, just in general in Beast Moon. There's some Beast Moon forms that have protections on their overtimes. But essentially, my idea as to what exactly can be done with overtimes, which is an idea that many people share, is have an enchant to where it's able to protect an overtime. And the reason why you want this is because this will give reason for many different people to use overtime spells like Basilisk or like King Artorias. Because some people like to play the game a little slower, but still, you can get a lot of momentum just because of how powerful they are in terms of damage, and also because of the fact that you still gain some sort of momentum when you cast them. If you were to allow enchants to protect overtimes, then, or basically have a specific enchant that protects overtimes, that's usually what I meant to say. You essentially now are going to make it more difficult for the opponent to try to counteract it with a simple triage or shift. That way, this allows players to play a little bit slower, but still be able to gain quite a bit of momentum. In fact, quite on par in terms of momentum compared to someone who generally tends to waste their pips fairly frequently. And this is definitely very important because I really love diversity in terms of strategies and what spells you can use. And with the new turn-based system, while there are many good things about the new turn-based system, I feel like one of the bad things about it is that it essentially made high pip overtimes become extinct for the most part. And this is definitely an issue that I feel like needs to be fixed, just because of the fact that I just really would love to see a little bit more variety in terms of strategies that people tend to use. I do like to see people play a little bit slower and still do as well as someone who plays a lot faster. This is an offensive meta, but at the same time, just because it's an offensive meta doesn't necessarily mean that it should always be extremely fast. There should be some sort of middle ground to where you can play somewhat offensively and defensively in terms of this being slower paced PvP. And big hit overtimes are definitely the biggest thing that can help slow paced PvP players basically come in the rise. Because here's the thing. Is it going to be extremely overpowered? No. Generally no. Just because of the fact that you are going to be losing the potential of getting a lot more damage in through damage enchants, or through the fact that you can't pierce enchant your hits with accuracy. But at the same time, you're sacrificing that in order to be able to secure a big hit overtime, which in turn could still give you quite a good amount of momentum at the end of the day. So while it more than likely may not kill the opponent, you definitely can get lots of momentum out of it. And that's definitely the more important thing there, is the fact that they do a good amount of damage and still have quite a lot of momentum to be used. I feel like schools that can benefit from this, Myth is definitely one of them just because of King Artorias and Basilisk. But other schools that can probably benefit from it is going to be schools like the Life School, in terms of the fact that they have spells like Spiny Sword, which was used fairly frequently because it's one of Life's best offensive spells if you were able to set it up correctly. But because of the changes, obviously they can't really use it anymore, let alone rely on it. Another school that I think might be able to benefit from this is the Ice School. And the reason why is because I feel like Ice just needs something to where it's not formulaic 100% of the time. It's not to where it's like a Frostbite to an Iceberg to a Abominable Weaver, because that's usually just what Ice does and it works well, just because of the fact that they have the stats for it. But if you were to somehow do something to where you change Woolly Mammoth, because this isn't necessarily a spell that I will say people tend to use often in PvE. Maybe some of them do, but there are some better options out there at the end of the day. And you do get Lord of Winter right afterwards, so, you know, it's just better in my opinion, in terms of damage already. And obviously it is like one more pip, but more than likely you might get the power pips for it at the first place, so it's really not that big of a deal. Now, what I'm trying to talk about here, in terms of Woolly Mammoth, is one of my ideas is to make this an overtime spell, to where not only does it keep the stun, but also makes an overtime. That way it has damage and utility at the same time. And essentially what this will do is this will allow the spell to be used for stun block shield breaking, but it will also be used for momentum reasons. This basically will be a ice version of Skeletal Dragon that costs 1 more pip. Obviously does slightly less damage, but because if we're considering like as to all the fixes, but it will still be something that ice can probably use, that it's a little bit more unique in terms of strategy, and it might be able to, you know, utilize a strategy that might work for them pretty well at the long run. Because keep in mind, ice is the best school in terms of being able to survive a long period of time, just because of how good their stats are, and specifically their defensive stats. Now, I might even see a comeback of Snow Angel. I would love to see a comeback of Snow Angel. I think Snow Angel is an amazing spell that I've used to see very often back then, to where, you know, Ice Wizards just played up to a Snow Angel, and it's amazing. I'd really love to see the spell in action, and I would really love to see it rise again for sure for Snow Angel. And obviously, you already know that Death Wizards will benefit from this just because of the fact that they have Skeletal Dragon. Skeletal Dragon is just a really good spell, but like I'm saying, I feel like a lot of schools that have overtimes that could be used in PvP but aren't, just because of how easy it is to counter them, could be useful if you were to implement like an enchant that protects overtimes. You can say the same thing for the Fire School when having Burning Rampage. Now you have something that can protect Burning Rampage, but it won't be as OP just because of the fact that you can't damage enchant it. So that's essentially my idea that I have for overtimes, and what a lot of people have for overtimes. And essentially that concludes today's video, and hopefully you guys did enjoy. Let me know what you guys think, and as to what exactly would you do if they were to implement this change in the future. Would you be considering using big pip overtime spells then, just because it's a lot harder to counter, and maybe you like to play a slower style? Or do you just prefer playing the fast style right then and there, so there's no point of the change being made, in your own opinion? So I would definitely like to hear your thoughts, and as always, remember to stay frenzy. Peace.